Here's the issue with the WNBA, and I'm going to repeat a mantra. It is the most unlikable league and culture in all of sports by far. And I'm talking from the players to some of the ownership, to all the media members, to the podcasters, to those who defend it. It's the most unlikable league in the whole wide world. And this is just another piece of evidence to support that statement.
The WNBA was supposed to have found its savior, a once-in-a-generation talent, a household name before she ever stepped on a professional court. Player so magnetic she filled arenas and broke. Television records the moment she. But instead of celebrating her, the league has done something unthinkable. It has turned its greatest gift into its greatest liability. The truth is brutal. Behind the highlight reels and smiling press conferences lies a league so fractured, so consumed by its own politics that it is now being called the most unlikable culture in all of sports. And the evidence for that claim doesn't come from critics or rival organizations, comes from the way they've treated the one person who could have secured their future. Caitlin Clark's decision to reject the life-changing multi-million-dollar deal wasn't a fluke. It wasn't the mistake some sports writers rushed to call it. And it certainly wasn't about loyalty to a league that pays her pennies while cashing in on her name. It was something far more calculated. The trap designed so perfectly that the WNBA walked into it with eyes wide open. Now they can't find a way out. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the story the league doesn't want you to. A story of sabotage, hidden agendas, and one star who outsmarted an entire organization. Because what Caitlin Clark just did may not only force the WNBA to answer for its corruption, it could bring the entire system crashing down. To understand the brilliance of Caitlin Clark's move, you first have to understand the bait. It was flawless. A brand new league called Unrivaled had emerged, co-founded by WNBA stars Breanna Stewart and Fisa. And when they came knocking on Clark's door, they didn't come empty-handed. They came with what they proudly called a Lionel Messi style. Not just a contract, an empire. The numbers alone were staggering. Then $1 million for just 8 to 10 weeks of basketball. That's over 13 times Clark's official rookie salary in the WNBA, a laughable $76,535. To put that in perspective, she generates sellout crowds, record-breaking TV ratings, and millions in sponsorship dollars for the league. Yet she takes home less than a mid-level accountant. That's not just unfair, it's insulting. But the offer didn't stop at money. Along with the salary came something even more valuable: equity, ownership, a piece of the entire league. For the first time, Clark wasn't being treated as a replaceable player. She was being handed the keys to power, something the WNBA has never dared to give her. Even one of Unrivaled's own founders admitted what everyone else was thinking. Caitlin Clark was being exploited. They openly said she should be one of the top paid players in the world just for the sheer number she's bringing in. That statement wasn't speculation. It was confession. Proof that the WNBA was perfectly happy to use Clark as a marketing tool while refusing to pay her what she deserved. So when this deal hit the table, the assumption was obvious. She'd take it. Of course she would. Why wouldn't she? More money, more respect, more freedom. It was the ultimate escape hatch from a league that treated her like an item machine while handing her pocket change.
Another reason why Caitlin Clark needs to flee the WNBA. It's a political organization. They're not serious about business. That they don't care about traditional sports fans. It's a little cult that puts out little political statements and everybody wears vote t-shirts. They don't care about making money. They don't care really about building up this league and making it profitable. They're a charity. She needs to flee the WNBA and start her own.
But that's what made her next move so devastating, because instead of grabbing the bait, she walked away. Caitlin Clark turned down the offer. The sports world froze. This wasn't just unexpected, it was unthinkable. Who walks away from $1 million salary and a stake in an entire league? Who rejects financial freedom, ownership, and the chance to escape a system that clearly resents them? The media scrambled to explain it. Some said she wanted more rest. Others claimed she needed to focus on her rookie season. A few pointed to her endorsement deals, arguing she didn't need the extra money. But every one of those explanations missed the point. Clark's rejection wasn't about fatigue. It wasn't about endorsements, and it wasn't about loyalty to the WNBA. It was about sending a message. By walking away from what seemed like the perfect opportunity, Clark made it clear that she wasn't chasing paychecks. She was chasing power. This wasn't a decision for convenience. It was a declaration of war. While the WNBA was busy playing politics, Clark was playing a completely different game, one that stretched far beyond basketball. She didn't just reject Unrivaled's offer. She transformed that rejection into a weapon. She turned down millions in order to shine a spotlight on something much bigger, the broken, hostile system she was trapped inside. And that's why her decision worked like a signal flare, because suddenly her story wasn't just about sports anymore. It wasn't about wins, losses, or even salaries. It was about something that caught the attention of people far outside the basketball world, something that had the power to shake the entire league at its quote. What was that signal? It was the sound of the federal government stepping. The moment Caitlin Clark rejected that offer, the story jumped out of the sports pages and into the national spotlight, because suddenly it wasn't just about a superstar passing on money. It was about the growing evidence that she was being targeted, exploited, and silenced inside the very league that depended on her. And that's when the federal government got involved. A former White House staffer, Sean Mullen, publicly called for a federal investigation into the WNBA. His claim that Clark was the victim of a textbook hostile work environment, not just tough play, not just rookie hazing, a systemic campaign of abuse that the league allowed, if not encouraged. The evidence is damning. In her very first season, she's already been hit with 6 flagrant fouls, a number some veterans don't rack up in an entire career. She's been blindsided by deliberate body checks, shoved to the floor by Kennedy Carter, and taken down hard by Marina Maberry. 10 games missed, 10 from injuries that should never have happened if the league actually protected its biggest star. Even her opponents can't deny it anymore. Phoenix Mercury guard Sophie Cunningham came right out and said it. The star player of the league is not being protected. Think about that. A fan, not a talking head, a competitor, admitting on record that the league is letting its brightest star get battered on purpose. And yet, silence from the top. No real suspensions, no meaningful fines, no public defense of Clark. The WNBA has treated every foul, every shove, every injury as business as usual, while the player responsible for their record ratings is left to take the hits, literally. This is why the accusations of a hostile work environment hit so hard, because it's no longer speculation. The bruises are, the injuries are real, and the league's failure to act isn't just incompetence. It looks like complicity, but as bad as the physical targeting was, it wasn't the only sign that something deeper was going on, because the politics didn't stop at the court. They reached all the way to the Olympic stage. If the hits on the court raised eyebrows, the Olympic snub removed all. Because what happened there wasn't about performance. It was about politics, leaked details from veteran journalist Christine Brennan's upcoming book revealed the truth. Caitlin Clark was never going to make the Olympic. Not because she wasn't talented enough. Her stats and impact spoke louder than anything, but because the decision had been rigged from the start. Her roster spot was sacrificed as a farewell gift to Diana Taurasi, a legend of the game, but a player long past her. It wasn't about fielding the best possible team to represent the United States. It was about protecting the old guard, rewarding loyalty, and shutting the door on the one player whose stardom threatened to eclipse them all. And the reasoning was even worse than the reports say. Officials were terrified of the backlash if Clark was included but didn't get enough minutes on the court. Think about that. Rather than risk her popularity overshadowing veterans, they chose to keep her off the team entirely. They didn't snub her because she wasn't good enough, but snubbed her because she was too good, too popular, too undeniable. The message was clear. This wasn't about competition. It was about control. Clark's Indiana Fever coach, Christy Sides, delivered the news. Clark's response wasn't anger, and it wasn't defeat. It was a warning, she said. Simply, they woke a monster. That line wasn't just defiance. It was prophecy, because the league's attempt to humble her only exposed how fragile their power really was. And once that monster woke, there was no putting it back to sleep. What came next proved just how much the WNBA needs Clark and just how quickly the entire system can collapse without her. For years, the WNBA has brushed off criticism with the same excuse. We're growing. Give us time. But when Caitlin Clark entered the league, that excuse was obliterated because the numbers told a story no spin could erase. Clark on the court, the WNBA reached heights it had never seen before. Average viewership during her games, 1.81 million people. Arena after arena sold out. Teams had to move to bigger venues just to handle the demand. Merchandise sales exploded. For the first time in decades, the WNBA wasn't just on the sports page. It was dominating national headlines. But the moment she stepped away, everything crumbled. During the 10 games Clark missed because of injuries, ratings collapsed by a staggering 55%. Average viewership fell to just 847,000. That's not a dip. That's a free fall. That's the kind of collapse that terrifies networks, advertisers, and sponsors. And here's the brutal truth. This league isn't surviving because of the WNBA as a whole. It's surviving because of Caitlin Clark, one player, single-handedly propping up an entire organization. The WNBA knows it. The networks know it. Even her rivals know it. And yet, instead of protecting her, instead of building the league around the one star capable of carrying it into the future, they've treated her like an inconvenience, a cash machine they can milk without ever giving her the respect, protection, or influence she deserves. It's not just short-sighted, it's self-destructive, because the numbers don't lie. Without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA isn't just weaker, it's irrelevant. And that's why her decision to turn down the $1 million escape wasn't foolish. It was strategic, because in that moment she proved that her fight isn't about chasing money. It's about something far bigger. She didn't walk away from power, she created it. And that rejection set the stage for the most devastating move yet. On the surface, it looked insane. $1 million, equity in a brand new league, freedom from the WNBA's politics, and Caitlin Clark said no. But the brilliance of that move wasn't in what she gave up, it was in what she gained. Because that rejection was never about the money, it was about leverage. By turning down the unrivaled offer, Clark flipped the entire conversation. Overnight, she wasn't just another athlete chasing a paycheck. She became the athlete willing to sacrifice millions to prove a point, and that point cut right to the heart of the WNBA. The system is broken and she refuses to be complicit in it. About how devastating that was for the league's image. For months, critics had said Clark was being exploited. For months, fans had begged the league to treat her better, but it wasn't until she herself rejected $1 million payday that the story exploded. Suddenly, the mistreatment wasn't just speculation. It was undeniable, because no athlete walks away from that kind of money unless something deeper is at. Her rejection turned a quiet controversy into international headlines. It amplified the whispers of hostile work environment into a roar that the league could no longer ignore. And it gave credibility to calls for federal intervention. Because if Clark, the face of the sport, was willing to burn a fortune just to make a statement, then the problem had to be real. In one move, she reframed the entire narrative. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the executioner. She didn't just reject unrivaled bait. She weaponized it, using her own sacrifice as proof that the fight wasn't about her bank account. It was about tearing down a corrupt system. And that's when the second phase of the plan began. Because just as Clark created the crisis, the WNBA players' union saw their chance to strike. The ripple effect of Clark's decision didn't stop with the headlines. Her rejection of the unrivaled deal created the perfect storm, and the WNBA players' union wasted no time seizing it. For years, players had quietly grumbled about pay, conditions, and respect. But nothing ever changed because the league always had the upper hand. Were locked in until 2027, and management knew the players didn't have the leverage to challenge them until Caitlin Clark blew the doors open. Almost immediately after her rejection became a national talking point, the players' union announced something no one expected. They were opting out of the collective bargaining agreement early. The deal that was supposed to hold for another 3 years was torn up in a single statement. Union President Nneka Agumake didn't sugarcoat it. She called it a defining moment, warning that players could no longer afford to stand still. In other words, the patience was over. The gloves were off. And here's the key. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. Clark's sacrifice had given the union the undeniable proof they needed to demand more. They could now point to her story and say, look, even the biggest star in the league, the one carrying all of us, is being exploited. If she isn't protected, if she isn't paid, if she isn't respected, what chance do the rest of us have? It was the perfect weapon. The union turned Clark's rejection into a rallying cry, using it to justify their nuclear option. And in doing so, they created an existential crisis for the league. Because without a collective bargaining agreement, the entire financial structure of the WNBA is now on the table. Revenue sharing, salary caps, endorsements, TV money, all of it. The players weren't asking anymore. They were demanding. And just like that, the WNBA found itself squeezed from both sides. Federal investigators circling from the outside, and a player's rebellion rising from the inside. The walls were closing in and panic was setting in at league headquarters. For decades, the WNBA operated like a protected bubble, small, niche, and insulated from real accountability. But Caitlin Clark shattered that illusion. And now the league finds itself trapped in a crisis of its own making. On one side, federal investigators are circling, armed with accusations of a hostile work environment, potential civil rights violations, and evidence that Clark has been deliberately targeted. Subpoenas could expose years of internal emails, private conversations, and policies the league never wanted the public to see. If even half of what's being whispered is true, the cover-up may end up looking worse than the abuse itself. On the other side, the players' union is ready to go nuclear by ripping up the collective bargaining agreement. They've made it clear if the league doesn't give them their fair share, they will shut the entire operation down. That's not a negotiation tactic. That's a declaration of war. And stuck in the middle is the very player the league tried to humble, now holding more power than anyone in the organization's history. Caitlin Clark has gone from the WNBA's golden goose to its greatest threat. The system they built to control her is now being dismantled by her. The panic inside league offices is palpable. Do they admit failure, finally, protect their star and beg for forgiveness? Or do they double down, using their media allies to paint Clark as selfish, difficult, even dangerous to the game she's saving? Every path forward is a gamble, and none of them are safe, because the truth is out, the numbers are out, and the public is watching. The league wanted Caitlin Clark to be their savior. Instead, by underestimating her, they may have created their own executioner. The WNBA thought it could control Caitlin Clark. They thought they could cash in on her star power while boxing her into the same broken system every other player was forced to endure. But in trying to humble her, they woke something they were never prepared to. Her rejection of the $1 million unrivaled deal wasn't a mistake. It was the master stroke, a sacrifice that turned whispers into headlines, that transformed quiet frustration into a player revolt, and that forced the federal government to look directly at the league's ugliest secrets. Now, the WNBA stands at a crossroads.